All right, guys, what we did in the last video was we hooked up the back button and we added front-end validation to our app. This is going to be the final video in our tutorial series, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to hook up our app to a real database so that we can actually store user credentials and log in by authenticating against a server. Doing so, we're going to be using Firebase, and I'm going to show you now how to set this up. All right, start by going to console.firebase.google.com, and then you'll be presented with this dashboard here. Select Add Project, and I'm going to name mine Login Tutorial. Got to spell it correctly. All right, so now that you have the name here, go ahead and make sure that you have Use the Default Settings checked. Select I accept the controller terms, controller terms, and then create project. Now it's going to take a second, and when that's done, we'll move to the next step. All right, once it's finished, go ahead and click Continue, and now you'll be brought to your dashboard for the login tutorial. Now that you're on this dashboard, click this little icon right here, and go to Project Settings. You're going to need this information shortly, but for now, we're going to go to Project Overview, and we're going to set up auth. So click this, and then what we're going to do is click Set Up Sign-In Method. And in our case, we're going to do email and password. So click this little pencil and click Enable on both of these. Actually, enable only the first one. Leave this one disabled and click Save. Now, when you see that this is enabled, you'll know that we have authentication ready to be set up. So back over here to the project settings, we're going to go ahead and add these settings to our app. All right, so on the left, I have my settings open on my Firebase console, and on the right here, I have my VS Code open with my login.html file open. You're gonna wanna find your head tag, your closing head tag, and you're gonna wanna go directly above that. And you wanna go ahead and paste in some information. So I'm gonna include this in the description. I'm gonna include a link for you to copy and paste this exact information. Although all of these are gonna be empty. All of these paths, or all of these variables are going to be empty, because what we're going to do is we're going to use you're going to want to use your own information from this settings page to populate this config object. And I'm going to show you exactly what this, where this information is coming from. So in doing so, I'm going to go ahead and populate each one individually. So I'm going to go ahead and delete what I've got here and just go through it one at a time so that you can make absolute sure that you know what's going on. All right. So the project ID is this project ID right here on the dashboard. So go ahead and copy that and then put that inside of your project ID variable. All right, now the API key is this web API key here. Go ahead and paste yours into here. Now in our case here, what we're doing is we're putting the API key into the file itself, and we don't want to do that in a production setting. This is okay for development. This API key you want to keep hidden. It should stay a secret. So what you would end up wanting to do in a production environment is actually going in and grabbing this from a server and populating it yourself that way. That way nobody can see the source code, or anybody who sees the source code can't find your API key. Because if they have the API key, then they can actually use your app for whatever they want. You don't want that to happen. And you should do that actually with this entire config object, to be honest. All right, so the auth domain is going to be, let me just pull this up over here. So the auth domain is going to be your project ID.firebaseapp.com. And so I'm using these little backticks here. These backticks are located above the tab button and below the escape button on almost every keyboard. It's the little backtick. Now, the reason why we use that is we can put JavaScript inside of strings this way, and you would use a $sign and 2 curly braces, and then anything inside of here, you can put some JavaScript in here, and it'll add it to the string. So what we want to do is use our project ID, and then continue the string after that by saying .firebaseapp.com. So firebaseapp.com. The database URL is going to be https:// Go ahead and put your $sign and curly braces, and we want to put the project ID inside of there. And that's going to be .firebaseio.com. It's a little different. Project ID, go ahead and set that equal to your project ID up here. Storage bucket, that's going to be $ with the curly braces project ID, and then we'll continue the string by saying .appspot.com. And then finally, this messaging sender ID is going to be this public facing name over here, but only the numbers. Only grab the numbers. Copy those numbers over and put that in here as the string. And now you have your config object, your project ID, and then directly below that, we're saying firebase.initializeApp, and we're passing in that config object that we created here as the argument here. And now what we're gonna do with all of these is we're gonna copy this and put it in our signup.html page in the exact same spot, directly above the closing head tag. Save both of these files, and now we're gonna have access to this Firebase object within our script here. So now that we have that, go ahead and open up your project in this window on the left. Now, the way that I've got this set up is I have VS Code on the right and my window on the left with my console open, and that is gonna be my workflow for this video. So previously what we were doing was on submit, what we were saying was console.log submit. So we wanna remove that, and we're actually gonna wanna do stuff now. And the very first thing that we're gonna want to do in here is we're actually going to grab the username and password. So const username, I'm gonna say UN, equals document.getElementById, and we wanna grab the email input, and we wanna grab the value from that. And then below that, password pw equals document.getElementById, and the ID for that was password input. I'm gonna grab the value from that as well. All right, cool. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take two different paths here. So if we're on the sign up page, we're gonna wanna call one function. If we're on the login page, we're gonna wanna call a different function. So we have this page type variable that we created in the previous video. Let's go ahead and use that. So if this.pageType is equal to login, then we want to take one path. Else if this.pageType is equal to sign up, we want to go ahead and take the other path. So let's start with the sign up, and we want to start with the sign up because we don't have any users yet, so we can't even log in the first place. So starting with sign up makes perfect sense here. So remember we have that Firebase object that we have access to now. So we can actually come in here, and on sign up we can say firebase.auth. Now this is kind of a long function name, so just bear with me here. Create user with email and password. That is actually, this is something built into Firebase, and this is something we're gonna be using in order to create a new user in our Firebase database. So what this does is it takes a username and a password, which we grabbed up here. So we use username and password, and then it returns a promise. And so the way promises work is whenever this comes back, we can say .then, and whatever the result is, we can call a function with result as the argument to that function. So inside of here, whatever we put inside of here is going to get called whenever we receive a result back from the server if it was successful. And for sign up, we're not going to handle errors, but we will for logging in. And you'll see why we want to handle those for logging in just a moment. So let's go ahead and say, if we get a successful response back when we log in, we're going to want to redirect to the logged in page, which we do not have yet. So what I want to do instead is say console.log result. That way you can see the result from the server in the console down here when we actually create a new user. So if we go back to this dashboard here and I get out of the settings and I just go to authentication, you can see no users for this project yet. There's no users here yet. So let's change that. Let's go into our sign up form and let's go ahead and create a user. So I'm going to create one called Zach at portexe.com. And let's go ahead and verify that. Zach at portexe.com. Click next, create a password, and then confirm the password. And when I click next, now we see this object printed out in the console here. This is that result from the server that we're logging right here. You can see it has a couple of properties. It has additional user information, credential, operation type. Operation type here is sign in. It also has the user, and inside of here it happens to have the email. Now, if we go back to our Firebase console here and we refresh, wait for it to refresh, you can see now that Zach at portexe.com is now inside of this database. So now we know that we have successfully created a new user with the username and password that we had. So that's great. But what we really want to do is whenever we sign up successfully, we want to go ahead and redirect the user to a sign up page. So what we'll do is we'll create a new file called loggedin.html. And I'm actually going to I'm going to provide this so you can paste this over here. I'll provide a link in the description for you to copy and paste this HTML file here. And I'm going to explain what this is really quick. But this just has our bootstrap and our styles and everything so that it looks uniform. But this part right here, what this is doing is it's going into the URL and it's checking the username. So when we say loggedin.html, whenever we go from our sign up page or from our login page to our logged in page, it's going to look like this, loggedin.html. And then there's going to be a hashtag with the username that we're going to put. Let's see, Zach at portexe.com. We're going to include the username in the URL when we redirect to the logged in page. And what this is doing is it's grabbing that username and it's saying, welcome username, you have successfully logged in. So that is what that is. And I just wanted to explain that, although you don't really have to worry about it. All right. So with that being said, when we successfully log in, we want to go ahead and redirect to that page. So window.location.href is equal to, and this is where we're going to go ahead and create that URL. So it's going to be /loggedin.html plus we're going to want to add, so here we'll go ahead and add the hashtag, and we'll go ahead and put user, because remember this object that comes back has a property called user. So res.user.email. And so now the URL will contain the email. That way we can greet the user whenever they are logged in. So I'm going to save that, come into my dashboard here with Firebase, click these little 3 dots here, and I'm going to delete this user. And I'm going to click delete. That way it's gone. So I can recreate this user one more time with the redirect, so you can actually watch that in action. So let's go ahead and start this. So ZACK at portexe.com. Click next. Again, confirm it. Click next. Create a password. Next. Confirm the password. And now when I click, whoops. Now when I click next, we should be redirected to the logged in page. So I'll click next. And we are in fact redirected to the logged in page. It says, welcome Zach at portexe.com. You have logged in. That's awesome. So now we're able to create users. Now let's look at logging in. So click this little already have an account login button so that now we're on the login page. Now in our submit, let's take care of the login portion of this instead of just the sign in. So again, firebase.auth. This function is going to be called sign in with email and password. Again, it's going to take the username and the password, and it's a promise, so we'll have .then. Now we're going to do the same thing. We'll put in our function with result as the argument, but after that function, this closing curly brace, you can put a comma, and you can put an error. So we can put a function for when we get an error, and I'm going to call the argument here error. And I'm going to simply console.log the error so that we can look at what this error object looks like in just a second. And then what do we want to do if we actually get a successful login? Well, we want to do exactly what we did here. So just copy this in and paste this. We want to relocate to the logged in page with the user in the URL. Okay. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to come in here and I'm actually going to put in incorrect information. And then I'm going to click next and then put the wrong password, just click next. Here we have our error object, and you can see the code says auth invalid email. So I'm not going to go through and parse and display the exact message, but what I am going to do is if we do get an error, I'm going to actually say, I'm going to put in an error message between the button and the input. And if you remember, earlier on in this series, we created a div called error message. So we'll just simply populate that. We'll say document.getElementById. The ID was error message, and we're going to set the inner HTML value equal to incorrect login info. Now, I want to take this, and I also want to put it in the success portion, but instead of setting the inner.html equal to incorrect login information, I want to set it to an empty string, because if we happen to type the wrong information and we have this incorrect login information message shown here, and then we type in the correct information, we want it to disappear. Even though we are in fact going to a different page, it's good to clean it up. So I'm going to save this, and let's see if we can log in. So I'm going to put in zach@portexe.com. I'm going to click next, and then I'm going to type in the wrong password. Cool, so now we see incorrect login information here. So now I'm going to type in the correct password. And click next, and it successfully logs us in. Hey guys, I had a lot of fun making this tutorial series, and I hope you had a lot of fun following it. If you liked this series, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you have not already, and I'll see you next time.